STAGR Cast, brought to you by STAGR Gear. All right, we're rolling with another episode of STAGR Cast. I believe this is episode number 7 now. We're back in New Hampshire. Tonight we're with John Wright. How's it going, John?
Good, how are you?
Thanks for doing this with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
Been trying to line you up for a while, but things have been busy for all of us, so it's awesome to get here and do this with you.
Yep.
To kind of kick it off, let's, like we do with everybody, want to give us a quick background on yourself, where you're from, what you do?
So actually, I'm from Concord, New Hampshire. I've lived in this residence my whole life.
Oh, really?
I grew up here, so I've been here 40 years. I've got a place up north, camp, that I grew up hunting out of. I'm a contractor, do a lot of building remodeling, and that allows me to hunt.
Yep.
And I kind of schedule my work around hunting, so it makes it nice.
Makes it handy. That seems to be a common thread with a lot of people
It
who've been
definitely
talking
is,
to.
yeah.
I mean, it's not the greatest thing, because financially I could be a lot better off if I worked in November. That's when everybody wants their work done. But you know, you got to live.
Yep.
You got to live.
Yeah.
If you're 60 years old and you can't walk anymore, well,
Yeah.
you made money, but you get to hunt.
Yeah. Would you say you hunt New Hampshire the most out of?
Yeah, New Hampshire and Maine.
Yep.
New Hampshire and Maine. Started hunting Maine about 10 years ago. Probably about 12 years ago. But yeah, that's fun up there. It's a different animal, different terrain. But
Would you say a lot different than New Hampshire deer hunting?
a lot different, a lot less mountainous.
Okay.
In certain areas, it's a lot less mountainous.
All right.
Bigger bodies, you'd probably say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I think that's depends on the location.
Yep.
But Maine's got some great deer. They've got a 1 buck rule.
Yeah, that's
You shoot one deer, and that's great. I think it gives a lot of opportunity to a lot of other hunters once you get your deer, you're out of the woods. So no matter if it's a bow, muzzleloader, rifle.
and no Sundays too. I think that saves a lot of bucks too. Really,
It does.
Yeah.
It does. It's a pain, but once you
It
get used
is.
to it, it is what it is.
It's like a travel day, right? It's when you go up or come back. Or,
It is, and I guess the theory behind that is that was the day for the landowners to be able to use their land.
Yep.
And not have hunters all over their land.
Yep.
I get that.
Yeah.
They're allowing us to hunt on their land. If they need a day to use their land, great.
Yep.
I don't mind that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it'll definitely come back to the differences and stuff between the states. But
Yeah.
to kind of roll into our new segment we did with the last podcast with Joey was the shameless stats segment. And we talk about how many 200-pounders are the best scoring bucks you have. You want to hit us with a little bit of some numbers here?
All right. Well, 200-pounders, how are we weighing them? Because that's a controversial subject.
Ooh.
Because there's some people that weigh them with the front end in them. There's some people that weigh them fully cleaned up.
How do you weigh them?
I weigh them fully cleaned
That's
up.
how I weigh them too.
Yeah, that's
I
standard.
split the hind quarter and everything.
Yep. I mean, everything's out of them. If you want to eat the heart, great. But, there's no, I don't know. That's how I was taught to
Me
weigh
too.
them.
Me too. Yeah.
If you want to weigh them with the front end in them, that's fine. But,
I heard that's how they do it up in Maine.
yeah, it could be.
That's how.
Could be. I think everyone's different. It's
Yeah,
all
no,
their
for
culture,
real.
how they were brought up,
With, I think, scoring procedures, you have to be clean dressed, right? Is that how you get in them?
You do, but who checks?
I guess it's just somebody at a gas station that's checking your deer.
I
versus-
know one check-in station that they won't weigh your deer unless it's cleaned out.
Okay, no matter what.
No matter what. They will not even let you put it on the scales, never mind the trophy entry. They will not let you weigh your deer.
Right.
And they're very adamant about it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
But anyways, long
Yeah.
story short, fully cleaned out. I've got 2 over 200.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 1 in Maine, 1 in New Hampshire.
Can't beat that. That's great.
And a bunch that if I left the front end in them
Yeah.
and left the diaphragm, they'd probably be right
So
there.
I've seen some of your posts. You've shot a lot of 180, 190,
Yeah,
170
yeah.
plus deer that
And
are all
there's
over 2 with
nothing
it.
wrong with those deer.
No, absolutely.
those are
absolutely
great
not.
deer.
Those are
Yeah.
great deer.
Those are great deer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So aside from weight, what's your best scoring buck?
My best scoring buck was in 2019. That one grossed out 168 inches, and that was a nice buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, he there was some excitement in that hunt.
I bet. Yeah,
Yep.
we'll definitely post a picture of that one. I think that's the picture. The first time I ever saw a picture of you,
Yep.
I think was that buck. That was
Yeah.
2019. You said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that
giant.
picture getting shared around. Ton of
Yeah,
people
that
throwing
one got
thing
rolled around quite a bit.
Yeah, and then actually finally met you. I was like, oh wait a minute, that's that guy. That's John.
Yeah,
So that was a great buck for sure.
Yeah, that's one of those probably once in a lifetime deer.
Yeah,
He's a giant, yeah.
and that's New Hampshire
With
buck.
the drop
That's New
tine.
Hampshire. Yeah,
That's a beautiful buck.
Yeah.
Drop tine, too.
drop tine.
Gotta
yeah.
love the drop tine.
Cool little hanger off.
Yeah, a little squiggler. That's a funny drop tine. I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Cool location.
You
Yeah.
shot. I mean, you should look around this trophy room here. If you're watching the video segment of this, you look around John's garage here, and he's got a lot of great bucks, which we'll kind of throw some video up after that. But what's your next best scoring buck after that one?
So my next best scoring one was actually one I shot in 2021 in Maine. It was
Okay.
it was an 8-pointer, and that one grossed out at 146.
Gotcha.
And he's, I've shot some. It's funny how deer score. Some are more impressive looking than
Right.
what they score, and that one just added up.
Yeah.
But in the last 5 years, I've shot 4 record book bucks.
Really?
Yeah,
That's a heck of a run.
You've
So,
been hitting the stride, huh?
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
boy, I mean, it's fortunate. I mean, you can't control what's on a deer's head. You really can't.
No.
I mean, it's and my buddies give me a hard time about it. Oh, that's the luck you get,
Hey, I'd rather be lucky than good any day.
I don't
Any
know.
day.
Yeah,
put your time in the lucky
Yeah.
you get. It seems
Yeah.
like for
Yeah.
sure.
yeah,
You're definitely doing something right, though, because I've been watching your Facebook page for the last few years, and it seems like year after year they're rolling in the 140+ inch bucks,
yeah.
But
It's time.
Yeah,
It's time.
yeah.
If you spend enough time in the woods and
Yeah.
you're persistent
Yeah.
and it's so easy to make excuses why you shouldn't hunt. And I still fall into it. It's too warm. It's too windy. It's raining. I've learned to push myself on those days that are not
subpar, yeah.
that are not prime days.
Yeah.
And the more time you're in the woods, the closer you are to getting one. So it's you just got to go. You just got to go. I mean, I in 2020 I shot one. It was 70 degrees out at 1:00 in the afternoon. That buck was on his feet.
That's something.
He was on his feet running does.
Yep.
And but it was all my buddies weren't hunting that day.
Right, because it was hot.
It was hot. The
Yep.
deer aren't going to move.
Right. And that's why it all goes back to, I heard a biologist say one time, it has nothing to do with the weather, it has nothing to do with the moon. It all has to do with the amount of daylight
Yeah.
that is happening at that time of year. That's when the does come into heat.
Yeah.
It's all about daylight. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 degrees out or 72 degrees out.
Yeah.
They're going to be bred when they need to be bred.
Yeah.
But, I mean,
It
so.
seems like everything goes out the when they're rutting hard. Everything goes out the window.
It's
You
all
can be-
they all come in at the right time.
Yeah.
Mother Nature knows, and it's all because of the winter survival or the fawn survival through the winter. They need to be dropped in the right time in the spring.
Yeah.
But
It's funny. You get those special days, I call them, where things just come unglued. You never know when it's going to be.
yeah,
And probably in my 20s, I fell in the habit of hunting a few days. Nothing was going on. So I wouldn't hunt for a couple days. Well, those could have been the 2 days that things just came unglued.
right.
And, I said to myself, I'm not going to miss this anymore because, the days I stopped hunting and didn't hunt, it seemed like, oh my God, everyone shot big deer that day.
Yep.
Didn't matter what the weather was. Didn't matter that what you saw the day before. When it comes unglued and when they start traveling and it's just, you got to be there. You got to be in the woods.
It's true.
You know.
You got to put your time in. No
Yeah.
doubt about it.
Yeah.
So kind of to go back to what we originally started with there, I want to pick your brain on what you think the biggest differences are between Maine and New Hampshire. What would you say? Is it the type of the woods? Is it the terrain? The genetic differences in the deer? What do you think is the biggest separator of the two states?
Yeah, Maine has some rolling hills that it's not as mountainous where I've hunted. I'm sure there's big mountains like Katahdin and stuff. They're more rolling hills. They do a lot of cutting in Maine. They do a lot of cutting. I think
Yep.
the primary food in Maine is these cuts. And if you can get around those 3 or 4 year old cuts, those deer use them. I mean, they live to eat. I mean, the does live to eat. The bucks, well, they're a little mystery, but if you hunt the does around those cuts and you stick with the does, the bucks will show up.
Yep.
I mean, they're gonna be there. They're gonna at least check on those does every night, every morning, whatever the case is. New Hampshire, it's a lot more mountainous. There's not as much cutting, I don't feel like, anymore. There used to be. Northern New Hampshire used to be a lot of cutting. And that seems to be kind of gone by the wayside now. They don't cut like they used to, and I think it's affected the deer herd up there.
In the northern part, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yep.
you know, Pittsburgh had its heyday back in the 90s, late 80s and early 90s. I mean, they were killing they were killing 20, 25, 200 pounders up there. But it's when they were cutting.
That's drastically lower now, right? The
Yeah,
200
they
pound number.
might get, I mean, Roscoe would know, but they might get 5 a year now.
Yep.
Yeah, I think he said it was lower than that.
You said it
this
was
year.
2 in 2021. I think it was only 2.
Yeah.
Which is, that's crazy. You used to hear
That's low.
Pittsburgh was like
Yep.
where you're going to get the great big ones.
And
you
it's
know?
still great hunting up there.
Yeah.
I've hunted up there. I've shot some nice bucks up there, but it's still a great place to go hunting. There's
Yep.
a lot of deer up there. There's a ton of deer up there. And it's fun, you know, it's fun. A friend of mine rented a camp for years up there, and I'd go up and hunt a couple of years with him out of Thanksgiving week, and it was fun. You know, you get the camaraderie of all the guys together, and you know, one year I think we all killed bucks. It was great.
Yeah.
Can't beat
Nothing
that.
better than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's definitely North Country up there. It's like kind of flatter and
Yeah.
bogs and stuff, kind of up that way. I've never been up that way.
You've never been up there?
No.
I mean, there's some good mountains up there.
Is there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some good mountains up there. The access has changed.
Really?
There's a ton of access now. There used to be a lot less access, and that grows bucks too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Lack of access. Yeah.
with all the technology now, people aren't afraid to go in the woods like they used
Onyx,
to.
man. Onyx
Yeah.
has changed the game.
Yeah, yeah.
Really, you got to go deep now. Like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, like you said, everybody's got that thing in their pocket now that
Yep.
can tell them exactly where they are.
Yeah.
Even if there's no cell service, if you download the map
Right.
before you go.
Right.
You know, and
It's replaced the GPS for a lot of guys.
yeah.
It has.
It is. Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
better than the GPSs, in
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
opinion.
you
Like
can see all the terrain and everything. It's
Yeah.
great. It's a good tool to have for sure.
topography, satellite imagery, the whole nine.
Yeah.
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 Would you say that northern part, Pittsburgh, is a lot like Maine as far as
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it seems like I know we talked about Joey last week and other people. There's a line
Yeah.
that cuts across the northeast. And
Yeah.
It seems like that's above that line versus down more southern
Yeah,
New Hampshire way.
and the deer density is good up there. You start moving a little further south into the whites, the deer density goes down a lot.
Okay.
There's still some deer there. I mean,
Yep.
don't get me wrong, there's still some great bucks to kill, but they are a lot more scattered. They're in smaller pockets, and when I say pockets, you might find a pocket of 2 deer.
yeah.
And they're harder to hunt, for sure.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and it's a lot more rugged.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
big
you don't
mountains.
have the logging roads everywhere to get you out of the woods.
No,
you
yeah.
know. You go into the whites in the national forest, and you know you could, other than the hiking trails, you're out there. I mean, it's all mature woods. You don't have the new growth.
Yeah, you shoot one way in the back. There's no logging roads close by really to get them out.
No.
No.
You're dragging a long ways.
No, yeah. That's what I always get a hard time about. You know, if I shoot a deer, that some friends of mine just razz me a little bit. Why'd you have to shoot it way out here? Well, that's where he was.
Yeah.
You know,
That's where they tend to
that's
be.
where he was.
Yeah.
What would you say your most favorite thing about New Hampshire is and Maine? Each state.
Yeah, New Hampshire has great access. We're losing a lot since COVID. I've seen a lot of posted signs, a lot of lands getting bought up.
Really?
Yeah,
Vermont, same way.
Yeah.
and it's squeezing hunters into the accessible lands. But I hunted Wisconsin 2 years, back in 2009 and 2011, I think, and I knew nothing about it. I went out with a friend. We got a lease. It was a fun trip. We saw a bunch of deer, but we were restricted to 80 acres.
Okay. Little
And
piece.
so it was bow hunting,
Yep.
and we sat in a stand. And ever since that last trip, I've appreciated New Hampshire way more,
Yep.
just because of the access. You can roam around. You can, and that's why I tell people, I'm like, yeah, it's great, but you're handcuffed out there.
Yep.
You're handcuffed in New Hampshire. You can go anywhere. If there's not a posted sign, it's
You
pretty
can go.
much accessible.
Yeah.
I mean, once in a while you get into, people don't want you in there, but,
It's tough about the Adirondacks, because in the Adirondacks, if it's private land, you have to have permission.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Oh, it
not
is over there
posted.
too?
Yeah.
It's tough, man, because you get over there and a lot of the public land's not marked. So like, I know a few years ago before we had Onyx, it was a challenge
Yeah.
trying to figure out, okay, where is the park? Where's the state land? Where's the 100, 200 acre chunks that are bordering it? Because nothing was posted.
Yep.
Why would you post it if it's
Yeah.
all written permission or whatever? But
and then you get into like this purple paint law. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it.
What's that?
Yeah,
So if you come across a property and the trees are blazed with purple paint, that means it's private property, and it's as good as a posted sign. And
Really?
I've had some friends run into it in Maine,
Oh, no kidding.
Interesting.
and I ran into it in one spot in New Hampshire.
Just purple paint all over the trees.
It's just like they mark property line, like the national forest of the state. It's usually blue or red, but this is purple.
And that means no go.
That means you're not allowed to go, and hopefully that doesn't come here.
Interesting.
Yeah, because that's a lot easier than putting posted signs out
Yeah.
for sure.
New Hampshire does
People-
a good job from what I've seen with their state land as far as marking boundaries. It seems like
Yeah,
they
they
do a
have.
very good job compared to Vermont. Sometimes it's black and white, but what I notice in New Hampshire, it's very well marked.
Yeah,
Seems
and there's a lot of state land. I mean, there's some 40,000 acre chunks.
Yep.
That's state land, and then government land too.
Yeah, national.
National
That's
forest.
huge. That's
Yep.
huge. It's nice to get away from people. That's where I like to hunt, is those bigger woods.
Yep. You like the big mountains and big pieces and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I always want to get to the top for some reason. I don't know why.
Hey,
No
that's
matter
You
where,
and me both, man.
that's where they are.
Yeah.
It seems like for
Yeah.
sure.
It seems like it's a lot easier to hunt down the mountain than
wicked.
up, because if they're up there looking down at you, well, your chances are pretty slim.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know.
And like I said to you earlier, you can't get above them when they're on top. That makes sense,
No.
right? Yeah.
why
Yeah.
they're
They
up
sit
there.
right on top, looking
Yeah.
right down over.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, I just wanted to point out, people listening can't see, but you have moose antlers lined right around this garage.
Yeah.
And a common theme that I'm finding with guys that kill a lot of big deer is you all like to pick up moose antlers.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
it gets you in that country
Yeah.
where those big deer are. Because I
Well,
think,
yeah, it's a funny story, because I found an area probably back in 2012 where it had some moose in it. And over the years, picking up some moose antlers, we had one mild winter, and the deer never left that area. And I'm like, I'm looking around, I'm saying, geez, there's some good bucks in here,
yeah.
And the next year I started hunting it.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was some good bucks in there.
Yeah.
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 And it's a place I still like to hunt.
Yeah.
The moose are gone. The moose they've just died off, and
Yeah.
they don't use it anymore. And the deer, there was a yard there that the deer used to go to in the winter, and they cut it off like 3 years ago, and it's decimated the deer population in that range.
Really?
Really?
It's funny, without that yard there, they got to travel further to get there and come away from it.
So they're not willing to risk it by, I get what you're
Yeah,
saying.
there's still some that go back and forth, but
Right. Not as many.
it was just so easy for them before.
Right.
And I mean, it was a nice chunk of hemlock, and it'll come back. They'll find another place, and it's all cycles. Every place
Right.
is cycles,
Yep.
Right.
But
Have you noticed that usually big bucks will be in with moose during deer season?
I've heard that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I've never, I don't want to say I've never, but I have caught them with moose, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not common for me.
Right.
It's not common. Those big bucks, I don't know where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where they come from. I struggle sometimes early muzzleloader season trying to find one.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they show up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they traveled from miles away.
Probably just not laying any sign. You know?
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. You just got to keep hunting,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
Lack of competition, I think, has a lot to do with that, with bigger deer in the big woods. And I think we kind of hit on that with Joey a little bit. He was talking about a deer, and I was like, well, were you finding big trees banged up all over there? And he's like, no. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I see that all the time. You'll find a big deer, and you just find a big deer, and I can't find a rub bigger than the size of my pinky, and sometimes they drive you nuts. But if you're hunting for rubs, you won't find them.
It's funny because there was one area I was hunting probably in 2018, and the place had scrapes like nobody's business. I mean, you'd see 40 in a day on this mountain, and just they were everywhere, and every one of them was a 150-pound track in them.
Right.
Every one of them. And I mean, I hunted it for 2-3 days, and I'm like, there's some respectable deer here, but it's early in the season. I want to try to find a big one, And I was booking it down out of there one day, and I crashed into a big one. And it's the biggest one I've ever shot. And he had just showed up. I don't know where he came from. Bare ground, 1:00 in the afternoon. I popped a doe up out of bed, and there was a knob off to her right, and I snort wheezed, and that thing came charging down off that knob.
Okay.
Really?
Talk about a change of events. I was heading out of there.
Yep.
I was heading out of there.
Yep.
I was done with the area.
When you least expect it.
Yeah. And when we dragged the deer out, we saw on the road where he crossed the road. I mean, there's this great big track heading right up to where I shot him.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Who knows where he came from? It could have been 3 ridges over.
It could have been.
That time of year, that's what they do.
He could have been.
They just show up.
Yeah.
There was a pretty doe in the area, and he found her.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, to keep it rolling here, I don't think we talked about this before, but would you describe yourself as a tracker, or are you a sitter, still hunter? What do you do?
So I'm definitely not a sitter.
Yeah.
My preferred method would be tracking on snow, when we get it, but it doesn't keep me out of the woods. I mean, I like still hunting. I feel like I'm getting better at it. It's just slow. Like I might cover 2 or 3 miles in a day, where tracking, 5 or 6 is easy.
Yep.
You just know what's going on. Like, bare ground still hunting, you don't know if that deer's over here, or, you've just got to be on the ball all the time, and your eyes have got to be peeled. They blend in so much better. And I have shot some nice ones still hunting, but I mean, I'd rather be on snow.
Yep.
Yeah.
It seems like you kill. Would you say it's about half and half?
It is. Yeah. It's been about half and half.
Yep.
Yeah. And, some friends of mine give me a hard time because, once I start closing in on the bare ground, I kind of know within a day or so when something's going to happen. I'm going to get an encounter.
Yep.
Right.
He's here. And I told a friend of mine last year that I need some rain. It's too noisy. That buck is there. I need the leaves to soften. I need to get in there on quiet ground. And a couple days later it rained. I went up in there, shot the buck.
No shit.
I mean, it was just textbook.
Yep.
And he said, "Oh, you said you were going to do it." I'm like, "Well, I felt like I had a good chance of it." You know?
Just needed the conditions for it.
Yeah, and that's all it is. I feel like we're scouting more than we're hunting. And then when the conditions get right, that's when you start hunting.
Right.
You're
just moving.
Snow.
You're covering ground.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just tough to cover ground on bare ground.
It is. It's
on those dry days especially.
You have to be an optimistic person.
Yeah.
And you have to like to be in the woods too, because you're doing a lot of moving, not a lot of finding.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it'll wear you down too. If you're on bare ground multiple days in a row, and
it can.
It's a psychological game.
It can wear you out for sure.
I've got friends that are great deer hunters. They refuse to hunt bare ground. They'd rather go to work. I can't go to work. If it's deer season, if it's gun season, I can't go to work.
You got to be in the woods to get them.
I'd rather be on bare ground. Even it's all about being out there.
Yep.
Right. So
yeah, teach your own to that, I guess, for sure. How would you say you attack a bare ground day? So it's like you're heading out and it's bare ground.
Yeah, I mean it's slow. It's slow, like I said. The one thing I've learned is that deer, they get freaked out by a steady walk. If you're walking through the woods, crunch, 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 even if they can't see you, it just wigs them out. They don't know what it is. They know it's not natural, and they run. They'd get out of there. They'd rather not risk it to see what you are most of the time. So I try to take a couple steps. I mean, if you ever watch a deer walk through the woods, it doesn't march nonstop. It takes a couple steps, takes a bite, even moose. So I try to do that a little bit. You know, I try to
Mix your cadence up.
yeah.
3-4 step stop.
And
3-4 step stop.
And I use brook beds. I use rocks.
Yep.
I'd rather. I mean, there's a lot of rocks up in the mountains. I mean, if you can make 6 or 8 steps on just some rocks, well, you haven't made a sound then. You know, usually they're covered in moss.
Yep.
You know, so I mean, they'll put up with a little crunch here and a crunch there, but that steady walk that just wigs them out.
They're gone.
It wigs them out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would you, on those bare ground days, are you hunting areas where like you've seen a lot of sign, or are you kind of just like striking off and going? Or
Yeah, I mean, usually the early season's a bare ground, so I'll get in an area, and the first thing I'm going to look for is food, because that's where the does are going to be.
Yep.
They just live to eat. So if I can locate some doe groups and figure out where they're hanging, then I know where to come back to. And most of the time you get around those does, you start seeing scrapes and rubs. I mean, those bucks have already been in there checking on them. So if you can figure out where those doe groups are hanging, those bucks they're going to be there eventually.
Yep.
I mean, they're probably not far off. You know, they've got their little holes that they like to lay up in during the day, but you know, they're not far off.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're going back to those same areas on days you have snow tracking?
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Trying to find those bucks. So
Absolutely.
back down to the
I mean,
does.
that's a great spot because at nighttime they come down and check those does. If
Yep.
they're bedding up above them, they'll swing down, take us cruise through there. They might not leave any sign. They might not freshen up scrapes. They'll walk by their scrapes.
Scent checking.
They'll smell if anything's been there.
Walk by some signposts. I see
Yep.
that a lot. They just walk by them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you doing any calling at all on those bare ground days?
Yeah.
A lot of vocalization.
Yeah, I do. I've gotten into quite a bit of calling.
Yep.
That kind of puts them at ease, I think. If they hear crunch, crunch, and then they hear a doe bleed or something, well, it explains the noise for them.
Right.
Yep.
It explains the noise. Doesn't work all the time.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
sometimes they run, sometimes they catch your wind, but it helps. Every little bit it helps. Yeah, it's
Do you use it more as like a calming thing versus like an attracting thing, would you say?
a little of both.
A little bit of both.
A little both. I mean, if it's noisy and I think I'm close to some deer, I'll call. You know,
Yep.
some like that deer I shot in 2018. I snort wheezed. He 100% thought I was another buck moving in on his doe. He was bedded on a knob above her. She was bedded in a saddle. She popped up, took off, and I snort wheezed just on a whim. And he charged down off of that.
You had no idea that buck was up on that
I had
knob.
no clue.
Just
No
hit a snort
clue.
wheeze and you come down looking
Yep.
to kick some ass.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't even get a shot at him when he came down off the knob. He was in some thick pines.
You must have been shocked then for sure.
I didn't, and the whole time I'm thinking, well, it's one of these 150-pound bucks that I've seen all these tracks. No, whatever. And he kind of moved off over and around in the face of another knob, and I'm like, oh, I'll see if I can get another look at him. You know, probably not going to shoot him, but let's see if I can get another look at him. So I'm walking up the knob and I'm grunting on a grunt tube and just pretending I'm a deer. And I come up over that knob and he's standing there making a scrape. He was mad.
Yep.
He was mad.
Right.
He thought I was a buck. And I'm like, geez, he's got a pretty decent rack on him. And I look back at his body. I go, oh wow, that's a real one.
Big one.
That's not
That's
a
a real
150
one.
right there.
Yeah, I mean he weighed 219, fully dressed out.
What a beauty.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
That was early season?
That was like November 5th, 6th, somewhere in there.
You do any rattling at all?
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah.
I've tried. I did rattle one in this year. I didn't know he was coming. I was impatient. I can't sit.
Yeah.
I rattled. 20 minutes later, I'm up and walking, and the deer came right in behind me, and I heard him coming as I was walking, and I turned around. I got a glimpse of him, but it didn't. He knew something was up. He bolted.
Yep.
So
You got a buck, your 2021 New Hampshire buck. That was bare ground, correct?
yep.
What's the story on that one?
So that one was in an area that I'd seen some scrapes. I'd seen a really big track on the next mountain over, and I was trying to find that deer. And this mountain that I had ended up hunting and killed that buck on, there was a good track in there, and then there was a big track. And I'd been in there twice. I looked up high. I couldn't find that deer. I knew he was there. And I knew there was a couple does in there, so I went back. That was that rainy day I was talking about. I went back in there and got up into this oak flat. There was some oak trees, and it had acorns. And it was midday. And I took a different way in just to see if I'd crash into them or learn some more about the area. And I sat down, had a sandwich. I said, I should just book it back to my truck. I said, they're not here again. I don't know where they are. I can't figure it out. And there's a piece of softwood just above the oak. And I said, well, maybe I'll go up in there and just poke around a little bit. And there's like an old logging road that goes up in there. And I'm walking up that logging road, and I'm looking off to my right, and I'm looking off to my left. I'm walking, and I turn and look straight in front of me, and 20 yards away, there's 3 does standing there staring at me on that logging road. And I'm, oh, where'd they come from? You know? And I think they were just as surprised to see me. And they stood there, and they're stomping their feet, the wind swirling right at them. And it was a big doe, and then like last year's fawn, and then a fresh fawn.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to blow these out of here because, you know, maybe he's around. So I'm just standing there, and I stood there, and like 10 minutes go by, and they're walking back and forth. Like, they want to come down that logging road where I'm blocking their path. And I can't believe, like, why are these deer still here? Long story short, way off behind them, I saw a little flicker or something. Probably 100 yards behind him. I'm like, oh.
On that logging road?
It was up behind.
Okay,
it was
gotcha.
up on that softwood.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
And so I saw the little flicker, and I'm like, there's another deer up in there. So, I mean, all 3 of these deer are staring at me. So I slowly pick my binoculars up, and I'm looking, and I see a rack. I'm like, that's him. He's up there. And he kind of disappeared. There was like a gully in between where these does were. So he disappeared. 25 minutes later, these deer are still standing there.
Really?
I mean, my legs are going numb. Like, I just want to move. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where he went. But all of a sudden, the mature doe, her ears laid right back, and she looked back in his direction. And her ears laid back, and she started running. And he came up over that hill. And it was like a split second, like, this is blowing up right now. There's deer running everywhere. And I picked up and shot, and I dropped him.
Yep.
Okay.
And, you know, it was a nice deer. It was a 10-pointer.
What do you weigh?
He weighed 168, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was a good bear ground buck for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was a fun hunt, you know. And that's what it's all about.
Yep.
You know, they don't all have to be 200-pounders.
So those does just wanted to come through you. They stood there.
They didn't want to go back towards him.
Okay.
That was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like, they were pinned.
Yeah.
They were on their way down that. It had stopped raining. They were on their way down to get something to eat. And he was behind them. They knew he was behind them. So they were pinned. They wanted to go where I was. They didn't know what I was, I think.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was just going along nice and quiet. Didn't spook them.
That's a pretty cool
Just caught 'em.
experience.
Yeah. We had a face-off. We had a standoff, you know.
Yep.
So going from bare ground, your 2021 New Hampshire buck, you got a smasher 8-pointer in Maine.
Yeah.
Was that a tracking buck on
That
snow?
was a tracking buck.
Let's get that story, because that's a huge buck right there.
Yeah, that was a beauty. So that deer, it was a new area to me. I had some work plans fall through for the last week of muzzleloader. So I bought my muzzleloader tag. I had already hunted Maine for a week and didn't see anything I really was excited about. I had one in the freezer. Not a greedy hunter,
Yep.
you know. But so anyways, I went up to this area, drove around. I had a friend that had hunted it 2 or 3 years earlier, and he gave me some pointers. I didn't really find anything in those areas, so I just picked this national forest piece. Went out in there, never saw a deer track. We got snow that night, and I said, I got to go back, because maybe it was snow that morning. I think it was snow that morning. Sometimes they'll hole up for a day. They just won't move in that fresh snow.
Right.
I said, I got to go back with a night a night on that snow and see if anything moved around. I went back and found a nice buck track in the snow. There was 2 or 3 bucks there. So I started hunting it, and every day I got into these. There was a couple of real exceptional ones there. Long story short, I was driving back and forth every morning, every night. It was a long day.
Yeah.
I think I took 1 day off that week. I was just run down. I wanted to take them the last day I wanted to take off. I'm like, someone asked me, are you going to go back? I'm like, I got to. There's just too much. They're there.
Yep.
Went back into where I was seeing the sign. It was still dark. I sat down on a rock trying to wait for it to get light a bit before I went in the woods. And I heard something. There was smoke there, and I heard something, and I could tell it was a deer. I poked up in there and had one blowing at me. And I saw there was 2 deer there, and I couldn't make them out. It was just, they were in the hemlock. It was too dark.
Yep.
They took off. Sure enough, nice buck and a doe. And the snow was like broken glass. It was crunch, crunch, crunch. So deathly slow, I followed them because I gave them some time to just settle down. I didn't think they knew what I was. Followed them. They were going up the ridge, and his steps started getting real short, real close together. I said, oh, they're settling right down. He's going to lay down. He went over and ate those little orange mushrooms on a tree, those little teeny ones.
Yep.
And I noticed that a lot that week. They were eating those little orange mushrooms.
On beach?
Slimy orange ones.
Yeah.
On beach, yeah.
And there's this ridge, and I can see there's a bench up in front of me. And I'm like, he's right here. I know he's going to be right here. And I heard something, and it sounded like bucks fighting. I'm like, were they just fighting up there? It's raining, it's starting to rain. It probably took me an hour to go 100 yards. I get up over onto that flat. Sure enough, 2 bucks had gotten into it. Like, I'm right here, and I couldn't see any of it happen. And it had been raining. The snow was softening. The tracks were deteriorating. It's go time now. Like, now I can move without them hearing me. There's all this ice clung to the trees. It's starting to fall out of the trees. Things are right. I start booking it on the track because, those foggy, rainy days, those tracks melt out quick. There was only a couple inches of snow.
Yep.
And I'm booking it on the track. Another buck joins in. So now there's 3 bucks, a doe, and all 3 bucks are just dogging this doe. And they go up a ridge, and then I see another, and it's one of the big ones that I was tracking earlier the week. But it was a little bit older. Do you get off these 3 smoking buck tracks to take that big one? It's the last day of the season.
Last day.
Oh. So I marked it. I marked it on my GPS. I'm like, I got to at least, these deer are right in front of me. I got to at least have an encounter. I can always come back to this track. It's early.
What time was it?
That was probably 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of day left then.
A lot of day left.
Yep.
I marked on my GPS, followed them. They got to the very top of the ridge, and they turned, and they were kind of paralleling it. And the doe was just feeding. They were feeding a little bit, but they were like intermingling with each other. You could tell they were close to each other. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, they got in this big area. It was probably a 20-yard circle, and they rubbed. I mean, they just thrashed all these trees. I took a picture of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa. I mean, they had all these trees busted off. It's like they got in a match to see who was
Tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're paralleling this ridge, 3 bucks on the doe, and I'm going along, and these tracks are smoking. There's steam rolling out of them. And all of a sudden, 2 of those bucks, and now they're all the same size tracks. They're probably 160, 170, maybe 180. 2 of those bucks slabbed down off that ridge. I'm like, okay. And the one that stayed with the doe was a little bit smaller track, but it was wide open down off to the left where those 2 bucks slabbed. I'm like, boy, what do? You go with them or you stay? I said, I'm going to stay high because I can see down there.
Right.
I can see down there. Mm-hmm. If I come up on them, I've got the height advantage. Mm-hmm. So I'm going along. I'm following the 1 buck with the doe, and I'm looking down here. And like something's going to happen. I'm so close, I just know something's going to happen. And I see something dark, like way out in front of me. I put my binoculars up. It's a log or something. pulling back down. I mean, the stuff's falling out of the trees. And I look over like this, and that buck was bedded 25 yards looking down that hill.
Wow. Boy.
Not a clue I was there.
Yep.
And I could only see about 6 inches of him, his body. But, I mean, his head in his rack, his head was up, and he was just looking, chewing his cud or whatever. I'm like, boy, if I could get against a tree and just get nice and steady, I'm like, so I took a couple steps, and I'm like, oh, boy, you could blow this. So I'm like, if I could get him to stand up, so I blatted at him. I had to do it 3 times. He finally stood up, and I shot, and he didn't go 25, 30 yards. He was dead.
And he's an impressive buck.
Yeah.
I want to grab that rack, Isaac, real quick for the video people. That's a heck of a buck.
Yeah.
So that was late season muzzleloader.
December 11th.
And those 3 bucks are thrashing around.
Yeah.
Still all aggressive like that.
Yeah. Yeah, they were
hold that
thrashing
thing up.
around. They were fighting. I mean, this deer was all gored up. He had a gore mark in his shoulder, his tenderloin. I mean, he was just a mess.
Yeah.
And I don't know what those other 2 were, but they were probably pretty comparable. I mean, they weren't little baskets.
And you said they all had about the same size track?
They all had the same size track.
I bet you'll be back in there next year. What do you think?
Yeah, I'll probably check it out. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what'd that buck score? 140 something, you said?
Yeah, he grossed 146. He netted 143. Yeah.
Heck of a buck.
He's a special
thick,
one, man.
Thick bases, swoops
Yeah.
out really big.
The mass carries the whole way. He's
Yep.
a giant.
He's got nice brow tines.
Yep.
You know.
You can't. What do you think that deer ages out at?
You know, I looked at his teeth, and I know that's not real solid, but I figured he was probably 5.5.
5.5.
Yeah. And he weighed 160. I mean, he was run down.
Right.
I don't think he was ever 200 pounds in his life.
Really?
Nope.
Didn't have the frame? Or?
No, he wasn't that big. I think he was probably 180, 185.
A lot of feed went to his rack by the looks of it.
And that's
you know?
those deer that got the big racks are not usually the 240 pounders.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's
The
something to that.
170s
There's something
grow
to
the
that,
big
ones.
you know.
Seems
And
like.
I mean, it took a lot of energy to grow those things.
Yep.
That's something special.
I
Right
mean,
there.
they gotta weigh like freaking 5-6 pounds. I don't know, more
Yeah.
than that maybe.
It's a
I don't
heavy
know.
rack. You could
It's
lift
a heavy
that
rack.
thing up. Very,
Yeah.
very heavy rack.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a buck. For
So
sure.
that was like, boy, the last day. You
What
know,
a treat, huh?
yeah.
freaking out a little bit.
Yeah,
That
I
happened.
mean, it's just great hunting. I
Yeah.
mean, just that excitement. Like, I got these 3 bucks in front of me.
on the last day of the season, they're that
Yeah.
aggressive like that. Like that's
Yeah.
like mid rut type activity. You
Yeah,
know, right
yeah.
for season. And
I
stuff.
think probably what happened was the doe they were with was a late one to come in.
Yep.
And sometimes you get in that late season and these bucks go nuts because they know it's almost over.
Yep.
And
That's
they're looking for that last doe that's going to come in.
Yep.
I've seen more bucks fights in late after Thanksgiving than
Interesting.
early season.
I have too
Yeah.
on snow. I've
Yep.
seen more in December than I have during rifle.
that's interesting.
Yeah, I've shot a few in December following does, like
Yep.
right on their butts.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
pretty
and they'll keep rutting into January.
Yeah.
Is
As
what
long
I've
as there's
heard.
does.
Yeah, as long as the does
Yeah,
keep
does
coming
going.
in, if they miss them or whatever,
Yep.
they'll keep breeding.
I guess that makes sense why they'd be fighting less does in heat and they're really
Yeah.
getting after it for each other.
Yeah.
Was that doe bedded close to him, or was he all alone at that point? Or
You know, I have a bad habit of getting a little excited when I shoot a deer.
Yeah.
And I didn't check out the scene, and I always kick myself for not. Like
Looking
it's
around.
11:00 in the morning. You had all day.
Yeah.
Why didn't you go back and see where those other 2 bucks went? See what he was bedded there. I think she was probably bedded below him because that'll happen a lot.
Yep.
You
Just
know,
keep an eye on her.
and they just watch her. They're either downwind of them or they watch them. You know.
Yep. So that buck was feeding on mushrooms with the doe.
Yep.
Went up on the shelf and immediately laid down.
No, he went on the shelf and fought with the other bucks, and then,
Oh, okay, that
and
was
then they
before
went
that.
for a walk.
Okay.
And then they went for a walk. Like, she must have got nervous, and
Yeah.
it was probably a mile later when I finally caught up to one of them laid down. I don't know if the other 2 were there or not.
Okay, gotcha. I thought so they ate the mushrooms, then they went up on the shelf, fought, and then they proceeded after that.
I think he wanted to lay down on that shelf.
Yeah.
I think they were both planning on it, but he bumped into that other buck.
And they're just stirring around up
Yeah, yeah. And they had a little standoff up there.
there.
But
When did you know to hit the brakes, or were you just going the whole time?
I was going because it was quiet. Everything was
Okay.
perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have those days where you can move through the woods quietly and you've got something in your favor, whether it be a real heavy wind, this was the rain and all the stuff falling out of the trees.
The slop. Yeah.
So when it's like that, a lot of times they'll bed in the open, I've noticed. And that's where he was bedded, right in the open, because they need their eyes. They can't depend on their ears because stuff's making noise everywhere.
Yep.
And, you know, those are the killing days.
Yep.
Those are the killing days. The windy days and the days that stuff's falling out of the trees.
Days you dream about, for
Yep.
sure.
Killing days.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
So switching gears, do you run any game cameras?
I used to.
You used to.
I don't anymore. I felt that they screwed me up more than they helped me.
No kidding.
How
How so?
so?
Yeah.
They would make me either hunt an area more than I should because I thought the deer was there because I got a picture of him 5 days earlier. Or I would say, geez, I should swing over and check, see what's on that camera. You know? And if I just hunted, maybe I'd have bumped into one. Might not have. Might bump into one checking the camera too. But I don't know. They frustrated me a little bit. I mean, it was fun. I've been doing a long time, back when they had the 35 millimeter ones.
Yeah.
Before anything was digital. I thought it was great. I stopped using them. I haven't run them in 4 or 5 years.
No cameras at all.
None.
And you've been pretty successful.
And
Has been your best
I've
4 or
shot
5
more deer
years.
without cameras than when I had cameras.
Yeah.
That's
So it was a little
interesting.
bit of a distraction. Like
I felt like it.
Yeah.
They just made me go places I wouldn't. They didn't, you know.
Would you say it got in the way of your gut feeling with stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. And I felt that hunting the fresh sign was a lot better,
Yep.
you know.
How do you scout now without them? Are you just going in and checking areas, or
Yeah,
how do you
you
put
know,
together a game plan before the season?
Look,
if you have one?
look for a lot of shed antlers in the spring.
Okay.
That's kind of how I get inventory of what's where.
Okay. So you replaced your cameras, taking inventory with your sheds.
Kind
taking
of. I
inventory
mean, it's
instead,
not. I mean, those deer travel a long ways to get some of those winter areas.
Yep.
So it's not.
As precise, maybe.
Yeah, it's not as precise, but you know you're in an area, you know, and some of those deer, they die in the winter. You know, I've got sheds off a buck I was trying to kill, and I got 3 or 4 sets off of them. Never saw. I shot at him once. He
Didn't make
just-
it through a winter though.
I don't know what happened to him.
Just disappeared.
Just gone.
Never found any more sheds or nothing.
No. No. So, I mean, I enjoy being in the woods. The biggest, you know, one of the biggest reasons these new cameras, the cell phone cameras, I don't want the camera to take any part of that hunt away from me. The scouting, any of it. Like, if I get a deer, I want it to be because I made that decision. You know, I scouted, I was in the woods. You know, when you take that human element out of the woods and you're getting these pictures sent to you, it's different. It's just a different thing. You know, it's not for me.
You want it to be as raw as you versus the deer. That's
Yeah.
what's going on. Yep.
Yeah, and you know, you can never say, well, that wasn't fair chase. You know, that's a big controversial thing. I mean, the hunting's changed in the last 3 or 4 years with the cell cameras.
Absolutely.
Let's face it.
Yep.
I mean, guys are getting a lot. I mean, I've heard these stories, 40, 50, 100. I mean, you know, can you imagine if you had 50 friends out in the woods, and when you got up in the morning, they called you and said, there's a buck
Everybody's
here and
sitting
here
on
and here.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
No.
You know, because
Yeah,
that's
no.
what, you know, some of these guys that are running these things, that's what it equates to. You
It's
know?
a lot of cameras.
It is. It's not for me, you know, and I don't want to offend anybody by saying that. It's just
Just where you stand. Teach
Yeah.
your own. Everybody has their opinion for sure.
You know, there's another part of that story, and I'm going to use something as a reference. Back in like 2005-ish, Zone A in Hampshire, they lost a week of their season. They lost a week of their rifle season. And the reason is because guys were baiting deer, and it was legal. They were baiting deer that last week of the season, and these deer are used to getting fed up there, and they were coming to these bait sites, and it became very effective. I mean, these guys were killing some of the biggest bucks in the country. They were killing a lot of them. Fish and Game recognized that this is a problem. They pulled a week of the season away.
Really?
They pulled a week of the season. A couple of years later, they made some adjustments to the baiting, and they don't allow baiting that late season But you know what? We never got that week back. So it's a slippery slope with these cameras. If they become very effective, you could run into the same kind of thing like that. You know, you gotta think about it.
I'm pretty convinced that it won't be long. And
There's a lot of pushback.
No more cell cams.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure of it. It's going to be next 5 years. You're going to see more states coming. It seems like a lot of trends in hunting start in the West and they work their way east.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it is, but it's just the way it seems to be. And in a lot of the Western states, they're banning cell cameras or game cameras in some states. Yeah. And it's going to just work its way over just like everything. And
we'll see what happens for sure.
I know Boone Crockett isn't accepting.
If you killed one with a cell camera,
if you have a picture.
If you have a picture of a deer.
I'm pretty sure, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure if you have a picture of a deer with a cell camera, you cannot enter it in Boone Crockett.
You know, I try to find compromise because I think hunters are split 50-50 on this issue.
Yeah.
They were on the baiting, and nobody wants to see anybody lose any privileges. And cameras are a privilege, and cell cameras are a privilege. If there was some way, and I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there, if they were legal outside of the season, November 1st comes, can't use them till December 1st, something like that.
Yep.
You know, these people that enjoy them, because people do enjoy them.
I love them.
Yeah.
Regular cameras are real fun.
Yeah. So people enjoy them. They can still use them. They can use them for what they're intended for, is scouting.
Yep.
They're not intended to kill a deer with.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and that's where you run into that. And I don't know if people can control themselves. They get a little down on their luck late in the season, and
right.
Boy, they get that picture that rolled in that morning. Boy, if I go in there, he was there. You know, so it's a slippery slope. You got to be careful.
Yeah,
you know, you got to be careful. You know,
for sure. And I mean, like I told you earlier, I do have some cell cameras, but I use them for inventory because you know a lot of the places that I hunt are 2.5, 3 hours from my house.
Yeah.
So I can't do that scouting that I'd like to.
Right.
And, you know, I take inventory and stuff, but like I said earlier and the last podcast, if I get a picture of a buck in the big woods, it's too late.
Yeah.
From where I'm at, it's too late. He's gone. You know,
Unless
like you said, well, in some instances, but, you know, I've never had that opportunity, but like you said earlier, you're hunting an area because you got a picture of a buck and he went through 5 days before.
Right.
Kind of the same deal with the cell cameras for me. You know, I'm working 5 days hunting too, so you know, get a picture on Wednesday, he's gone. You know, but
the biggest thing with the cell cameras is it's removing hunters from the woods.
Yeah.
Like I know people that won't go hunting if they're not getting pictures on their cell cameras.
I mean,
whoa, you know, it doesn't mean the deer's not there.
No,
they do learn to avoid those things.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You know, how many times have you got a big buck on a camera and he's never walked in front of it
one
again?
time.
That happens often.
I mean,
We've
learned
heard of that those big bucks are weird. They hear a camera snap once and they ain't going through there again.
I mean, I know one thing that I've learned running a lot of cameras, I run a lot of regular cameras, is I run them high and I tilt them down. And when I do that, the big bucks will keep coming. But if you run them hip level, that's it. One time, usually. Some don't care, but I mean, you know, just like people, some are smarter than others.
Right.
But the regular cameras, I love them because 90% of the regular cameras that I run, I'll set them out in August and I'll pick them up in March. And then I get to see deer behavior through the whole season. You're scouting. And that's what I like them for. But, you know, if it comes to a point, you know, not running cameras isn't going to affect me personally. But
a lot of big woods hunt same deal.
Not a lot. All the big woods guys. The guys that hunt the big woods don't need game cameras. You know, you
take off and run just like anybody else.
You know, when these things get abused is when new rules come in place. And just like I was talking about Pittsburgh, they were abusing the bait season. These deer were trained to come to feed because everyone feeds them up there in the winter, and they lost that season. They lost that week.
Right.
And not only did they lose that week, but now the zones below it are getting a ton of pressure.
Everybody's coming down.
Yeah, because anyone that has a tag left and they can't hunt zone A, well, the next zone that's got good snow is zone B.
Yep.
And fishing game, I mean, I've been to all the hearings and stuff, and they say, well, it's not affecting our kill numbers by putting, well, it might not be affecting the total number of deer killed, but you're putting twice the amount of hunters in that zone to do it because they can't hunt zone A.
It's going to have some sort of impact then.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to think about it,
Hey, a quick word, then we'll dive right back into the episode. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update on STAGR gear and let you know that everything is on schedule and everything is going as it should. So we're super excited about that. If you're following us on our social media pages or if you're subscribed to our email list, you'll be the first to know when pre-orders open. We got an awesome lineup of gear coming for you this year, so stay tuned and it'll be coming soon. All right, kind of continuing on the scouting thing. You said you're not using cameras, you're kind of doing shed hunting to take an inventory of what you got.
Yeah. I mean, it helps. Yeah.
When you go in the areas in the fall, are you looking for like scrape and rub lines? Does that kind of dictate where you're going to spend some time during the season?
Mostly it's tracks. If you can just find that big track, I mean, it's tough on bare ground, but I look at a lot of scrapes. They'll step in them every time.
So you're spending a lot of time looking down at the ground and stuff?
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, if you can find some wet areas, but just looking for that big hoof. And that doesn't always tell the tail of the buck, too. I mean, it could have big feet, but it's not necessarily a big deer,
Yep.
Once you get the snow and you can see the stride and the stagger and stuff, and I've tracked a lot of deer that don't have big feet, but they got the stagger.
So I think that's pretty interesting that you say you look for that big track, because I know a lot of guys are going in looking for the rub lines and the scrape lines and stuff, but that's a good point, looking down.
Do you find many of those big signposts?
Yeah, up in Maine I've seen quite a few. Back when I ran cameras, I put them on them. Back to like 2006, before anybody put cameras on those things, and it was eye-opening to see that how small of a deer can make a big rub.
Yeah, especially on those signposts, right?
Yeah. So I see a big rub. Yeah, great, that's cool. Get you excited, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a huge deer. More or less, if I can find a rub that's got those deep scar marks in him, that's probably means he's got a burly base. And he's an older deer. So that's more important than the actual size of the tree to me.
Okay.
So
about height. I usually look for height too.
Height is important.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, those bigger, taller deer are obviously going to rub higher.
I like finding those scrapes that have the limbs all twisted up.
Yeah.
That's what I like. That gets me fired up because it took a rack to do that.
Something to grab with.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So, yeah.
All right, let's roll into your 2019 buck. I know we talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
That was your 160 something he scored, 166?
He grossed 168, yeah. That deer, that was a long story. Basically, we got some snow in the mountains, and I was driving up a road, and I cut this buck track. And it wasn't a great big buck track, but it was the first snow of the season. I get excited. I just want to track deer.
Oh, yeah.
And so I get out of the truck, and I'm looking at, and I've found if you've got to talk yourself into taking that track, it's not the right track to take if you want to kill a really big one.
That's a good point.
But I did. I mean, I'll just go a little bit and see see if I bump into him.
Yep.
Well, I didn't go, I don't know, a couple hundred yards, and that deer stood up out of bed.
That quick.
And yeah, he was right there. I videoed him. He was a basket rack. It was early season. I don't think I'm going to shoot him. So he kind of loped off out of sight. He got just out of sight, and kaboom! No. Someone plastered him. Oh. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. And so anyways, I went over and talked to the guy, and he went on his way looking for the deer. And he goes, I said, I was just watching that deer. He said, well, how come you didn't shoot? I said, I don't know. I don't want my season to be over. It's too early.
Yep.
I enjoyed too much. So I went on my way and drove out that road further, and just kind of putting around. It's like 8 a.m. and I found a track coming off this ridge, and it was a good track. It wasn't a real big hoof, but it had a big wide stagger. He had a big chest on him. So, and he was by himself, and he was just milling around. He went down into the swampland, and he was feeding, and he was just dubbing. I'm like, man, this deer, and I can hear some guys working on a snowmobile trail, like, I don't know, a quarter mile away, and he's heading right for him. I'm like, geez. Well, he had already crossed the trail. I didn't know that, but he was going up the ridge on the other side, and he kept going to these spots, and he'd get in a spot he wanted to lay down, and he'd turn around and look it over, and nope, didn't like it. And he'd go to another spot, do the same thing. He'd stop. You could see where he turned around and looked around. Nope. And then all of a sudden, he lined out in these woods, and he was just straight line. I'm like, jeez, what's going on? So I tracked him, and he made a sharp left-hand corner, went up in the softwood, and I found a bed. And I thought I jumped him, but he was bedded right on this cliff. He was right on this cliff. And I didn't jump him, and he started feeding again. And then he made a scrape, and he was just, and this is a spot I was familiar with, and there's usually a couple does in there. But he was checking for them. They weren't there. They weren't there that year. There was no feed there. Those does weren't there. But he was feeding on mushrooms. There was some oak in there, and usually the does are in there for the acorns, but there was no acorns. And he's feeding, then he'd make a scrape. And then he'd go back to feeding, and then make another scrape. And there was another softwood knob just across this little valley. And I'm like, he's going to be right there. He's just dubbing too much. He's not out zombie walking. He's just, so I crept up that thing, and I'm calling, trying to get him to stand up and see, get curious. No. Gets over it, gets on top, you see where he turned around? Nope, doesn't like it. Lines out again. Out in the hardwoods, starts marching. I pick up the pace going. There he goes, pops up out of bed, bedded in nothing. Just
random, huh?
He had to bed down. He'd fed so much that he kept getting sick of not finding the right spot to bed. And he just plopped down right in the middle. And I had the gun on him, and I'm waiting for him to come through that opening. Didn't happen. He ran all the way down to the road, got almost to the road, made a 90-degree turn, and went right back up where he came from. It was late in the afternoon. I'm like, what are you doing? Maybe there was someone on the road and spooked him. Like, why didn't he just cross it, Next day, he did cross the road that night. He came back down across the road where he wanted to. And I've got an older friend that I met years ago in the woods, and he's like, he wanted to cross that road. You're going to find his track crossing that road tomorrow morning. He was right. He crossed that road. I tracked him. Snow melted. Lost him. Next day, went back in, drove around the roads. Well, I called my buddy again that night. I'm like, now what's he going to, and this guy is great. He's a good guy, and he just knows deer. And he goes, well, today he's probably going to go back up on that original ridge that you caught him coming down off of. Sure enough, there's this track going up on that ridge. And he's feeding on mushrooms, feeding. It was a snowstorm, raining. My gun was covered in ice, still muzzleloader. And I'm poking up through, and I'm going to catch him. He's here. He's going to lay down. He winded me. Took off. I gave him, 5-10 minutes. Got on his track, and it was one of those killing days. It was raining. There was noise. And he kind of made a loop out and around through this hardwoods, and he hit some softwoods, and I'm going pretty hard on his track, and I hit that softwoods. I go, this seems about right. And I just put the brakes on. I just slowed right up, and I'm looking around, and he was standing 30 yards from me to the right behind some stuff. I never saw him. He bolts 3 bounds right in front of me broadside. I pull up the gun. My scope caps are down.
You still run those today?
I do, but I don't fold them down unless I'm going through some stuff.
Oh man, I would have thrown those things.
and it was just, all I can remember was how big of a deer it was. It was just, he had a nice rack, but he was an enormous deer. Get on his track again, and he took me up into the softwood, and he'd go out on his track, and he'd turn right around, come back on his track, and slab up the hill and wait for me. He did it like 2 or 3 times. I'm like, what's he doesn't want to go anywhere. He wants to be right here. And I'm going along. He did that once. And he I don't know if I jumped him, but he's back running again. And I saw something. I'm probably 130 yards up through. It's kind of open softwoods. I saw something. I'm like, jeez, is that him standing there waiting for me? And I'm looking. I put my binoculars up. No, that's not a deer. Boy, is it a deer? Is it a deer? No. Is it a moose? No. And I'm looking at him. I can't figure it out. Well, all I can see is the back half of his deer, and it looks like the hind end and a leg. And it was raining. He was real dark, you know. So I'm like, well, where's his head supposed to be? So I move the binoculars, and I see one beam sticking out around the tree. Like, his head was right behind a tree, but the antler beam was sticking out. I said, that is him. So I got steadied up on him, fired, never touched him. It was a long shot. I wasn't real good.
Yep.
He didn't like that.
Yep.
He took me for a walk then.
Yeah.
Up over the mountain, 3 or 4 miles that way, decided he was getting out of his area, made a 9-degree turn, came back. I jumped him again. I'm smoked. I've been a long ways on this deer. It's getting late. I was walking back to my truck. I saw Ray cross the road again. I'm like, all right, well, now I know it's 4 o'clock. I know where to pick him up tomorrow. Went back in, picked up his track. That deer, I educated him real well. I followed his track, and when he got ready to bed, he made like 4 big zigzags in front of it.
Yeah.
Like 4 times before he laid down, like 100 yards at a time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, he's smart now.
He knows.
So I tracked him down this valley, and he bedded down for the night or whatever for a while, and then he decided to go for a walk, and he lined out down this valley, and so I followed him, got way down there. He got in a mess of deer, and the snow was minimal. Lost his track. Tried circling up high. He didn't come up out of there. I don't know where he went. It was, just melted. I think the next day I took off. I was so worn out from tracking him so much for 3 days in a row. Took a day off. We got snow that night. I went back, and I started at the other end of the valley this day. I'm like, he was headed down here. He's probably still down here. And he's like 6-7 miles from where I've been hunting him, And I'm walking in, and I saw a decent buck track, and geez, I'll take this up in here and see where he goes, It wasn't him, but it was hot. That area was hot. There was a doe in heat or something. Every doe bed I came to had 3 or 4 bucks checking it from all directions.
Oh, wow.
And then these 2 bucks got together and following each other, and they were slabbing across this big range. And I'm just following them because that's the only game in town. And I'm like, I know they're not. Neither one of them are him. They don't have that big wide stance. So I'm going probably 11 o'clock. They cut another buck track that's much older. And I'm looking at it, and the sun's out. It's a south-facing hill. It's melting the snow. And I'm like, that's him. And he's heading back the other direction where I just came from, but he's up a lot higher. I'm like, well, I could stay on these fresh ones. They stepped right in his track, but that's the one I want to shoot. I'm gonna take my chances. So I get on that old track, and he's going across the side hill, and I'm losing snow again, and it's painful. Like he'd walk out of the snow, and I'm looking for pock marks in the leaves, and I'm looking ahead to see if there's more snow. Somehow I got him through all that, and there was some stretches there that I'm just guessing that this is the way he went, And he had slabbed above all the doe activity. He was just scent slabbing. The scent goes uphill in the morning, and he was just checking them from an elevation. He got over across there and hit a little softwood finger, and 90-degree turn right up. I'm like, oh, here he is. He's going to be right here. So I poke up through there, painfully slow, poking up through, and I find his bed. And there's smoking fresh tracks walking out of his bed heading uphill. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yep.
Like he's heading up. Well, that doesn't make sense. He should be heading down looking for does.
Yep.
All right, well, so I'm following him up the hill. Like, what is he doing? I didn't jump him. He just got up on his own and is heading up this hill. And it's steep. And I probably went a few hundred yards, and I cut this great big buck track in a doe. And what happened was the wind was blowing down the hill. He smelled them. So he joins in with, and they're all the same age. They're all smoking fresh. And this other big buck track is hounding this doe. Now both of them, they're zigzagging up through this thick green growth. And this doe is trying her best to lose these deer, these bucks. She doesn't want anything to do with them. And they're zigzagging, trying to cut her off. All right, well, I'm going to give it till 3:30 because I'm way back in here, and I gotta get back out. 3:30 comes along. I look at my GPS. I'm like a quarter mile from the top. I'm like, all right, well, I'm almost out. I'll just go to the top. If they pitch down over the other side, I'm out. They got almost to the top, and they turned. And just before that, one of those bucks had slabbed off. Like, he cut off the doe. I'm like, what is he doing? That doesn't make sense. Well, what had happened is the other buck and the doe had made a circle, and he knew that, and he would just cut the corner. So anyways, I stayed with the buck and the doe and followed them up and around, and I come down into this hardwood flat just out of the softwood, and the doe, I see this great big deer pop out of its bed, and I get the gun up and no, where's the antlers? That was a great deer. And I'm following this great big buck track. I'm saying, if I follow this track to that bed, I'm going to be sick. So I'm humping along. It's 4:00 in the afternoon, and I get almost to where that doe bed is, and I look down, and there he is laying there,
Boy.
facing uphill, and he was downwind to her.
Yep.
And I think what had happened, and here I go again. I never went back and checked.
Yeah.
But I think when that other buck cut the corner,
Yep.
this giant caught him trying to move in on his doe, and he got up and ran him off. And then he came back and bedded below that doe that was hot and just waited for her. And as soon as I saw him, I dropped down on a knee, and he stood up at the same time, and I shot him, and that was it.
Folded
he didn't
him
get out
right
of
there.
sight. He didn't fold. I mean, he flopped around. I hit him in the neck.
Oh, okay.
He tried to take off, and I'm not afraid to shoot,
You got to shoot.
especially when you see a rack like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good buck.
So that doe, you jumped that doe out of her bed?
Yep.
And he still stayed down there below.
He wasn't in sight of me when the doe popped up. Like, he was over an edge.
Could he see the doe up there, you think, though?
I don't know if he could even see her. I think he could just smell her.
Okay, so he was just hanging out.
Because the thermals, it was late in the afternoon, the thermals were
pulling
coming
down.
down, and he just got downwind to her to smell her, just to keep
tabs on her.
So when she got up and took off, he probably didn't know that.
Yeah.
So
So if he was bedded right there close to her, then that would probably have been a whole different story.
it could have been, yeah.
Wow.
What do
Yep.
you weigh?
He weighed 192.
192.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heck of a
Gorgeous
buck.
buck.
Yeah.
Gorgeous.
And I had to, it was late in the afternoon. I was up over some ledges. I ended up having to leave him overnight, and it wasn't a good scene. But
First one you ever left overnight?
yeah, person only.
And you're at the top of the mountain, just
Top of the
right-
mountain.
right up in the heavy stuff.
Yep. And I kept saying, I got to get out of here. And finally, I just said, this is too hot. These tracks are too fresh.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen. I'll walk out in the dark. I don't care. I'll get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think I sent my girlfriend a text. It's going to be a late one. I'm way up in here.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't get nervous when I'm not home,
Yep.
because it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't have been persistent, if I hadn't have pushed it right to the end of the day, I wouldn't have got that deer.
And most people would have bailed out by then.
Yeah.
It's.
I mean, I wanted to.
Yeah. Your instinct though told you to keep going.
Yeah.
As much as everything else was telling you not to.
When it's right, you can't turn around. I made that mistake before when I was younger. Well, it'll be another day. Well,
Yeah. You only get so many days, and
You
so
only
many
get
good
so many.
days.
Yep.
And that comes with years of experience and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not something you
Yeah.
pick up right away.
When it's right, it's
intuition
right, and you just
you
got to
know.
plow forward. You have to.
Yep. That's a heck of a buck.
Yeah.
How many mile of a drag was that out?
So
The next
that was that was probably 3 miles.
Yep.
Yeah, but the first mile of it was brutal.
Down through the nasty stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was just sheer drop-offs. Like, you couldn't just grab a hold of them and walk down. You had to drag them sideways on the mountain to get around all these ledges. And then when you drag them sideways, it was so steep that he kept getting wrapped around all the
yeah.
trees, the little stuff. It's almost near impossible to drag a deer like that sideways when all these little trees are growing. He just wants to keep sliding down the hill.
Yeah.
And you got to pull him up and around those things. So it was brutal. But I think I left the truck that morning to go get him at 5 a.m. and it took 3 of us till 11 to get him out. It was finally in the truck at 11 a.m.
At least you had some help though. That's big.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
One guy just was picking the route because it was such a miserable place to get out of.
Yeah.
Like, he just walked in front of us to make sure we weren't going to go and end up somewhere we couldn't get back out, you know?
Yep.
So,
Jeez.
yeah.
A lot of real estate to grab onto though when you're dragging that thing out.
Yeah.
How much mat, like, what was the thickest part of the beam on that thing? Like, that thing is like almost like a
5,
moose,
6
it seems
inches.
like.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with that deer is his G2s and everything are just massive.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
You know?
You don't see that.
Yeah. Yeah. He was the king of the mountain for sure.
Wicked.
You know? Yeah.
And that other buck that was with that doe, you think he peeled off?
So I think this one ran him off.
He ran him off, okay.
Yeah. And I hunted that deer the next year. I couldn't find him.
Really?
I couldn't find him. I was running. We had a little bit of snow in 2020. The first couple days, I ran all over. I couldn't find that buck.
Similar size foot to that one?
This one had a bigger, like, banana foot.
Yep.
The other one had a smaller hoof, but he just had that big stance.
Yeah, big
And
old chest on him.
a friend of mine ended up shooting that deer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he shot him mid-season. He weighed 210 or 215, something like that.
Big old chest on
And
him.
he had a nice, he was probably 130-inch 8-pointer, 9-pointer, something
Yep.
like that. It was a nice deer.
Yeah. That's a crazy mountain buck, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good one.
You can't beat that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a lifetimer right there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're going to
that's
be
a good
hard
one.
pressed to beat that
Yeah.
in these hills. But they're out there, though. There's
Yeah,
something
they are.
special about these mountains for sure that
Yep.
produces them. But
Yep.
cool. You got anything else you want to add? Or
No, it was a good one.
that was a real good one.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this with us, John.
Yeah,
It was,
thank you.
It's great for sure, and there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
I'll
If there's
take
any
note of.
encouragement to these new hunters, you don't need to go buy 50 trail cameras. You don't need, just get out there. Just get it. The best way to learn is get out there.
Put the miles on.
Boots on the ground.
And, you know, there's the TV shows and stuff. They say you got to do it like this, that, and the other. It's not true. Just get out in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to, if you spend enough time in the woods, you're going to bump into something.
Yep.
You know, so.
Can't build that hunter instinct off of trail cameras. It's
No,
pretty-
you can't. And
You
you,
gotta get out
can't,
there and
you
experience
just
it.
can't replace time in the woods.
Yep.
No.
You know, with any kind of technology. So,
It's a good point to end it on right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Alrighty. Well, we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for tuning in, and this was great. So thanks, John.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.